All right, everyone. It looks like the waiting room has kind of emptied out here and everyone has joined us. So I just want to say hello, everyone, and welcome. We're really thrilled to have you all join us in today's discussion on the power of data and design in shaping the digital presence in higher education institutions. I'm Lex Haid. I'm the AVP of Interactive at Simpson Scarborough, and it's a privilege to welcome you today for the webinar and introduce our expert presenters. Enhancing university websites through data-driven insights is about turning insight into action. And in higher education, a website is more than just a digital front door. It's an open conversation, one that draws in prospective students, keeps current students engaged, and builds lasting connections with alum. But here's the challenge. How can you tell if your website is actually performing? How do you strike the right balance between creativity and measurable results, or between functionality and aesthetic appeal? And perhaps most importantly, how do you ensure you're meeting the needs of the people who matter the most to you, the users? Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today, and you'll hear from two of our digital experts who live and breathe this work every single day. And by the end of today's session, you'll hopefully have a clear picture on how data-driven decision-making and user experience testing can transform your website into a strategic powerhouse. So first up, we have Cassie Golda, Simpson Scarborough's Associate Director of Analytics Strategy with over 6 years of experience in digital web, brand, and media analytics. Cassie really bridges numbers and knowledge. She specializes in transforming complex data into clear, strategic insights that move the needle. Cassie's innovative, solutions focused approach helps institutions see what's working and what isn't working so they can make smarter decisions faster. And joining her is Dan Moore, our senior UX designer. Dan is the architect behind some of the most impactful higher ed websites out there. He combines usability research, UX strategy, and wireframe design to create digital experiences that are as functional as they are engaging. So, sitting at the crossroads of digital strategy and creative, Dan ensures that really every click, every scroll, every interaction is not just functional, but thoughtfully tailored for the best user experience. So, without further ado, I'll hand it over to Cassie and Dan to take us into the world of data, design, and digital success.
Thank you so much, Lex. That was super nice and super kind. Hello, everybody. We're so excited that you're here today. Just kind of a brief overview here of what we're going to be getting into. First, we kind of want to take a look, a broad view at just the current landscape of digital experiences in higher ed and kind of how they're functioning and what we see. And then get into our sort of data-driven approach, how we collect data, how we use that data to form insights and guide strategies and make decisions. And then through that lens, look at a few different case studies of different clients and different university projects that we did this work in to manipulate data and develop really engaging experiences. And then from there, how we can take those examples forward to continue to build a culture of continuous improvement and data literacy, internally or as partners, just making the best higher ed digital experiences that we can. Great. So at first, we want to get into the lay of the land, the digital landscape. The prominence and interaction of university websites is significant to the ability for institutions to recruit prospective students, retain current students, recruit faculty, engage alumni, and with metrics-based management, for strategy, we can really move the needle and have high impact on these digital experiences to achieve those goals. Whether that's, implementation of analytics, outcomes from impression testing, usability research, these exercises are crucial for our data gathering and understanding how to have the most success in the digital space. So one thing we kind of notice when we zoom out and look at the industry at large, institutions aren't fully harnessing their analytics or their technology stack to really optimize web experiences for prospective audiences. We have a largely content-focused audience. They're there to digest content and find specific information. But we're not really harnessing our analytics to meet them or to help them on those journeys. A lot of times institutions are reliant on folks who have, many are wearing many different hats. So relying on gut instinct to make these types of analytics-based decisions, or leaning on internal stakeholders rather than maybe looking at the data or looking at users at large and understanding what it is they truly need. When we look at some of that data, this comes from one of our CMO studies. This is something that we conduct across the industry, engaging with CMOs at different institutions to try to understand the current shape of the landscape. And this is as it pertains to digital and web. So one thing we're noticing is that overall been a budget decrease in investment in website design, development, and support, whether that's roles, technology, that sort of thing. So we're just seeing an overall decrease in spending there. When we think about the resources in-house at institutions, only over half seem to have some sort of digital focused role, whether that's a content strategist, a web developer, a web UI designer. And that's awesome that those roles are there because they have high impact on more than just the website. But when we look at the roles that really drive impact and really move the needle for user experience and high success for those users, we see less than a third having a UX role or a SEO role driving those optimizations. So with that, I'll hand it over to Cassie to kind of talk about how we get into that data and unlock it and use it the most effectively.
Wonderful. Thanks, Dan. That was a great intro. So as we've kind of alluded to in the beginning with Lex and Dan, higher education websites serve as a critical touch point for prospective students, current students, alumni, and faculty. But to effectively support these diverse audiences, we need to ensure that the website is optimized for user experience and aligned to institutional goals. Tracking the right data helps us understand how users engage with content, where improvements are needed, and how to drive better outcomes across enrollment, retention, and engagement. So here we're pulling forward another one of our CMO study findings, which is that 45% of colleges and universities do not have regular reporting of digital analytics to their leadership. This may sound shocking, but really isn't a huge surprise to many of us, and then probably you as well, because you live it. There are several factors that can contribute to this. The switch to GA4, lack of necessary tracking, not really understanding how all this data can hold together to tell that holistic story. Obviously, we assume this information is necessary and deserves attention from leadership. So in order to ensure this alignment, we need to make sure we're thinking about the story that we want to tell. As Dan mentioned earlier, the website's likely the first place that prospects are going to visit. So if we're not reporting on that, we're missing a big gap. So let's talk a little bit about what kind of data exists in the digital realm here. When we're thinking about analytics, one of the first consideration points should be, what data do I need? And what data do I have? I want to say that those are two very different questions. They're very different things because you might not always have the data you need, or you might have too much data. So in terms of ensuring you have the right type of data, we're going to want you to look at a blend of user behavior data, quantitative research data, so that might be like impression testing, website performance data, that could come from Google Analytics, and ultimately conversion data from your CRM. Diving in a little bit deeper, here are some examples of sources that you might actually use to enhance this work. Google Analytics falls under the user behavior and website performance umbrella of data. Optimizely and Hotjar are two additional tools that we could look at user behavior as well. Slate or other CRM tools will provide us that conversion data, while Qualtrics is our go-to for our quantitative research data. Of course, there's plenty of other sources out there, but we just wanted to pull some forward that we at Simpson Scarborough often use and we see our clients use as well. So now that we talked about data sources, we have to talk about the audiences who are impacted as well. So Although a lot of our work in web and interactive focuses on our primary audience of prospective students, it's important to note that the website serves many other audiences, like we alluded to earlier, those current students, and you can see all that falls underneath that, the community, the institutional community, and then also those faculty and staff. So we need to ensure that the site is optimized to meet these audience needs. And to do that, we need to make sure that we have the data to prove what kind of experiences they're looking for and whether we're delivering on that or not. Speaking of those experiences, I'm not going to go through every one of these, but here are some examples of site objectives for these different types of audiences. For example, current students might need to be able to find specific content on the website about academic programs. They want to know what the next year is going to look like. What are the things that they are to anticipate in their next year. They might be looking at campus events. They might want to understand, is there a hockey game tonight? What's going on? So we need to make sure that we have the relevant information front and center for them, depending on what audience group they fall in. I do want to zoom in here a little bit on the prospective student audience for a second, which we identified earlier as being our primary audience for an institutional website. This information comes from Nielsen Norman Group, who's a leader in the UX discipline. This information is directly from their study of higher ed that happened about 2 years ago, where they looked at over 200 websites and had responses from about 122 individuals, where they were trying to understand the things that were needed to achieve an exceptional digital experience for prospective students. And so the thing that rose to the top were these 4 key themes. We need to make sure that our website can answer these for the prospective audience. So they want to know, do they have a program I'm interested in? If we think about website data, I see a lot of Google Analytics accounts. And so I can tell you that program pages is usually one that floats to the top on many institutions' websites. The second one, how much will it cost to go there? If you think about the general thought on higher ed right now, cost is a big factor in that. So people want to know not just the cost in general, but they want to know how much will it cost me to go there. And that's not an easy question to answer, but we want to do our best to try to give them the information that they can start to dive into and find that answer. Will I get accepted here? That's important. I don't want to apply somewhere where I don't think I'm going to get accepted. That's something that they consider as they are going through it. But also, can I see myself here? So that's where the experience, like we got to find ways to represent the culture and what they can expect from the institution and the campus and the surrounding experiences through the website, which is, again, not an easy feat. All right, so we talked about a couple of the qualifiers that go into setting up and being able to analyze a website's performance. These are all important because they funnel into what we deem is essential for demonstrating value, which is a measurement first approach. When it comes to website analytics, making the reporting a bigger part of the story about the investment the institution is making in marketing is key. We want to think about awareness. We want to think about reputation and perception. Those are all things that our executives in the C-suite in higher ed is looking for. But how can we prove that the website is also moving the needle in those categories as a proxy for success? Because we might not always have awareness, reputation, and perception metrics every year. Sometimes those are measured every 3 years. Sometimes they're measured every 5 years. If you're doing a pulse study, that might be biannually, but that's still not super consistent. So how can we use the data we have in front of us to tell those stories better? And so that all starts off with goals. We approach all web projects the same with a focus on goals. Here you can see a brief highlight on the right of how we establish a measurement first approach and the key steps that are needed to ensure KPIs are established. The appropriate data is collected, not all data, appropriate data, and reporting is easy and accessible. So that all flows into what is my pride and joy is a measurement framework. As briefly noted on the previous slide, we must start with establishing our goals. And a tool to do that through is a measurement framework. For those who are unfamiliar, it's a framework that ensures consistency in measuring success across various strategies, campaigns, tools, with clarity on which metrics matter the most. It really is a systematic approach for collecting, assessing, and interpreting performance metrics in relation to institutional goals. So there's a lot that it's doing. There's a lot of information in here, but it's super important that everything in here ladders up to those institutional goals so that everyone is working towards the same North Stars, towards the same success for the institution. So here's an example of what a measurement framework could look like for your institution's website. We've simplified this for visualization's sake. I like to call this a micro measurement framework because it's a measurement framework is a giant Excel. I'm a big Excel girly. So if you can imagine an Excel spreadsheet where you're like hiding some of the columns, that's essentially what this micro measurement framework is. We hided some rows, or we hided, oh my gosh, we hid rows and we hid columns to provide a little bit something more succinct that I might be able to take to my web developer and say, hey, this is what I'm trying to achieve. These are the tactics of which I'm trying to do that through. Can we have a discussion? So here we listed out the three key business goals, which was enrollment, advancement, and engagement in this case, and then broke that down into the relevant website goals, KPIs, and then set some targets because that's going to be important. Whether you have historical data, let's start with our own data, historical data. If you don't have it, maybe you let the data collect for 3 months and then you set a benchmark. If you have a lot of sophisticated data, maybe you are able to do more seasonal benchmarks based on like knowing that higher ed is a seasonal industry. Maybe we're able to get a little bit more sophisticated in those goals. So it all depends on where you're at in your maturity of analytics. But in general, we want to set a goal and a target to see what we can reach and achieve.
All right. So from there, we're looking at how we set up our data streams, right? And now that we've set them up properly, we're collecting that data. And what that data does is gives us a really clean snapshot of the current state of affairs. So how do we use that snapshot to either then gather more data, have more refinements and more optimizations? Well, at large, when we look at our benchmarks here, we realize that higher ed websites are super large scale and really need refinement. At the end of the day, these things don't have to be overly complicated. Like Lex had said, the website really is the front door to your institution, and it should reflect that brand personality and try to, engage and capture prospective students. It doesn't need to be a digital reflection or directory of the institutional hierarchy itself. So some of the ways that we, take that data and then build on it are, mapping to those 4 key critical journeys from the Nielsen-Norman Group study, right? Do they have my program? Can I get in? What's it cost? By mapping those journeys, we know where we want to look in the data or where we want to gather more data. So by identifying those pain points, we might decide to conduct some user research or usability research, whether that's using our tools like Optimizely or Hotjar to gather more user behavior and then dig deeper into that structure and restructure the website itself, and making sure that we've cleaned up those user journeys and made them the most efficient as possible. Why we do this is, one, to provide value to our users. At the end of the day, they're not going to apply or enroll if they can't get the information that they desire, and to kind of also just visually improve the website at large to make it a more engaging experience for all users. So when we look at that type of data, what does it do for us? So user data can tell us how well the site is doing its job. In this example, coming from Concordia University out in Texas, we see that only 50% of users are even making it past this large image in the hero. So there's probably some really awesome, really well-written content, really rich content below this image, but people aren't getting past it. And we don't know this unless we collect this data, right? We just know maybe users are just clicking in random places or getting further down the site. So what this leads to is a deeper refinement on the page experience. What else does this user data do for us? It tells us what things are specifically important on a page as well. This comes from William and Mary, and this is specifically their visit funnel. What we notice what's going on here is that we've landed on the visit and tours page. from the homepage. And likely users are expecting this to be the visit page, when in reality, they're presented nine different options, and they just want to be clicking on the info sessions. That's what these two links are, is just to schedule your info sessions. So really, we know that this page should be serving that. It probably doesn't need to have these nine options. We need to restructure that content. And then last, that user data allows us to make refinements. This last example comes from Berkeley Haas College of Business. Similar to Concordia, none of the content below the menu is being accessed or used. So this just led to a full reconfiguration of their component design, their template design, to really get into the storytelling, right? We want to make sure we're serving that content in the right way at the right time. We're not forcing users to rely on their gut just to get to the right information. So what does that look like from a user flow process? These next examples come from St. Edward's. And again, these ladder back up to those same four Nielsen-Norman group questions and how we refine that process. And I do want to call out here that St. Edward's was actually an award-winning website redesign, and we'll get into that a little bit later. This is specifically for programs. In their old state, they had a very limited menu, and it was all hidden off canvas, kind of made things hard to find. And we refined that, exposing the menu, making sure Majors was like a main link on the homepage, getting you right there immediately and quickly. When we look at the cost, this is something that's really important to users, is to make sure that it's not buried. That was one of the biggest takeaways from the Nielsen-Norman group, is that the transparency often led to more apply links, more conversions, because if they think it's hidden, they lose trust in the institution and might look elsewhere. So in this exam, one thing that we always push is trying to pull out cost information from admissions. Those things are kind of very separate in the way that users think. So we try to pull cost information out to the highest level. So that's what's happening here, right? We know tuition and fees is buried deep within the admissions process here, and instead pulling it out to the highest level, making that information super accessible. And then this last example is coming from the admissions flow itself. We're getting really nitty-gritty with audience segmentation in the old state. So we just want to make sure we make that information a little bit more accessible, because we've already segmented ourselves as undergraduate. Why do we need to segment further as new freshmen? Just cleaning that up, making those pages also more robust, the page design themselves, offering more information, is one way to clean up these user flows. So once we've gathered that data, looked at that, started to make refinements, some really clear key learnings kind of come out that we want to apply to most digital experiences. One thing is making sure that we keep our design systems simple yet distinct, right? That's where brand comes into play. So we want to make sure we're answering those key questions as clearly as we can. Building a foundation with a flexible design system that makes sure the content is engaging and dynamic, and making sure it's super clear how we get to specific areas of information. And making sure that that content on the page, while well-designed, is also comprehensive and scannable. We've seen those websites. We probably have them on our own, where they're deep blocks of text. You don't want to read that. Users don't want to read that. So let's make sure we're designing content that is made to be quick and easy to read and access. And then last, making sure everything's navigable and accommodating. We don't want to hide the specific user flows. We don't want to hide information. We really want to gear our navigation to new users, right? Prospective students. Because current users, current students, internal users, they know where to go. They bookmark their pages. We just want to make sure this is as intuitive as possible for someone new landing into our experience.
Wonderful. Now that we have all those experiences set and we have the content that's scannable, we have the good user journeys that ensure that they're getting to the content relevant and relevant content quickly, it's time to report on that and measure that. And so I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about GA4 in the grand scheme of things. It's definitely one of the main tools that is used to measure website performance. We'll talk about some other ways that you can also measure website performance, but it is a big one. So It shouldn't come as a surprise, but for those who don't know, Google Analytics was built as an e-commerce platform, so it's definitely needs some customization to fit those needs of higher ed. What's really cool about GA4 is it tried to make our lives a little bit easier by providing us with this feature called enhanced measurement events. So essentially, with a click of a button, we can enable all these events that are listed on this page. However, this isn't really enough to cover the depth that we need based on everything that we talked about earlier, the user journeys, the content, making sure that the different audiences are getting what they need. We can't answer that with just the information that's here. So that's going to require us to customize it, which is great that GA4 is built to customize. It just takes a little bit of thought and forefront planning, again, starting with those goals, starting with our intentions to ensure that we're collecting the right data to fit our needs. So we can use a tool such as Google Tag Manager, or that might be referenced as GTM, to create some of these custom events that we have listed here. These ladder up to our goals and objectives that we've set within the measurement framework. Again, keeping that as the core of what we're trying to achieve. These additional custom events will give us a better idea of that performance on the website so that we can make those strategic decisions we need to. This is obviously not an exhaustive list of the custom events that you can track. Definitely thinking about like landing pages, you might have different information there if you're pushing like paid media somewhere. If you have a a give page, you might have a couple of different things on there as well. So this is just an example, but you can see how that can be applied to the other custom scenarios that your institution might have. Another area that's really important for this whole idea of creating data that will help us answer questions is visualizing that data and making it accessible. So we need to make GA4 a little bit more accessible in terms of the reporting. So they have two types of reports. One is called the report section. The other is called exploration. So we're going to talk about reports here first. Now that, sorry. Yes. So the before slide was how it's standard set. What's really cool about GA4 is that you can customize that, you can change it. So here's an example of what we would customize in the report section to allow those users to view that data quickly. We don't want to make it hard for them to access the data. One part that's a little bit tricky right now in GA4 is the lack of views. And so things like host name dimension is going to be really important. So you can zoom down into specific subdomains or domains of traffic so that you can kind of get to that same data that you would have in a view. It's not exact science, but it gets you closer. The same idea here is we want to make sure that if there's any custom views of data that we need, we establish them early. And we should know what those needs are because it should ladder up to our measurement framework and the questions that we're trying to answer based on that. So making sure that before we head into these initiatives that we have this customization in place will allow it to feel a bit easier once we get to that part of actually analyzing the data. So it doesn't feel like, oh, I have to analyze data, I have to download all these spreadsheets, I have to put them all together, I have to do all this stuff. No, it's there, it's ready for us to start to dive in because we know the questions we're trying to answer and we have the data we need to do it.
So we've gathered our data, we've made our refinements, and we are hopefully launching better digital experiences, right? So what happens after that? How do we know that it's working? How do we know that it's worked? What are some things we can do to prove that, look at that, and understand that? One thing we want to say is that always be testing, even after a successful launch, even after you've completed. You want to know how those things are continuing to work and how you can always continue to improve, right? This comes from Creighton University. This was a redesign that we provided. This was a new menu, definitely working better than their old menu. But upon launch, we did a little bit more usability testing, and we were finding that users weren't finding links that we provided. We're getting stuck within the menu, and then we're missing some really clear KPI links below here, like apply request info, things that we really value. So with that, we provided a new design, trying to make those things more clear, giving a little bit more visual weight and exposing hiding the menu, not letting it be a full screen takeover. So there's always room for refinement, but you have to test to understand that.
Another way to test outside of the usability testing is an impression test. So I want to talk through what that is first, because we've mentioned it a couple times in this presentation today. It is a user research method that helps us gauge a user's first impression of a design. It's a very quick survey. There's 5 questions, and they are only shown the homepage for 5 seconds, so they don't get to sit with it for a very long time. We know that impressions and people's opinions are made very quickly, and so we're trying to replicate that environment. So essentially, what we do is we take the homepage from before the website redesign and then after the website redesign. You might ask why the homepage? Well, it's typically one of the first places that somebody might land if searching for you or if you're pushing them to know a little bit more about your brand. So we find that that's an important entryway into the institution. And so the goal here with the impression test is to really assess the user's recall and measure what information they take away from it. And what's really interesting is that we use a agile methodology here because we want to get quick results so that if we need to pivot, like Dan just mentioned, we have the time to do it. We have some leeway in understanding where we might need to move the needle. Luckily, we've seen some great results in already what we've done, so we haven't had to make a lot of huge tweaks, but the 3 metrics that we typically look at are appeal, word association, and desire to explore further, which we'll talk about here in a second. But I just kind of want to set that as you see some of these pictures and we start looking at some of these results here. So we're going to look at 2 examples. The first is going to be York College of Pennsylvania, which is also an award-winning website. So kudos. We did a lot of great work on that, and the data shows it. So you can see here the before and after. We think it looks great, but we wanted to test that. We can't just rely on the increase of sessions and the increase of users because a lot of times it's a finite group of folks that are going to be interested in your institution and in your brand. You might be able to expand to different markets or create a new program that widens that scope, but it's not going to be a massive jump. So what other metrics can we pair with maybe average time on site, or average pages per session, things like that, to strengthen the story of success of these initiatives and of the update of the website. So if we flip to the next slide, you'll see some key results in those 3 areas that I talked about: net appeal, word association, and exploration. What was really exciting is we saw an increase in all 3. So for net appeal, we were able to increase the appeal. We look at it by 2 different types of audiences. We look at the unfamiliar and the familiar because traditionally they're going to have a little bit of a different perception of the institution or the brand. And so we thought that that's an important way to slice and dice the data. So that's the breakdown. The top is the familiar, the bottom, or sorry, the top is the unfamiliar, the bottom is familiar. But you can see that we positively influenced all of these metrics with our redesign efforts, which was super exciting. We did the same with St. Edward's, the same exact test. So you could see on the left hand was their before homepage, and then the right hand is the after. And again, it's just like a screenshot of exactly what they would see if they logged on and typed in stedwards.edu. This is what they would see. And so when we look at the results from the pre and the post test, from the impression test, again, we saw massive increases, specifically with the word association in terms of where we're trying to move the needle. Definitely an exploration. That unfamiliar audience wanted to explore more. That's what we want them to do. Once they get on the site, we want them to continue to look for content. We want them to continue to look for information and not just bounce off. The net appeal, we also saw increases, which was great, but the context you don't have here is that those were already high numbers. So any positive movement there was going to be impactful. So we were able to, again, show that we made improvements in these key areas that are important to the users that supplement the successes that we saw within Google Analytics.
So where are we going, right? We collect all this data, we make our refinements, we launch new sites. And then that's a cycle that's going to kind of have to repeat itself, right? We need to maintain these, we need to keep up with them, and we need to continue to engage over time. As the future of higher ed evolves, the digital experiences themselves are going to require a significant investment for efficient, tailored, and technological sophisticated interactions. A lot of that means bringing in the right technology, the right expertise on your teams, or hiring out for the right expertise to really drive these experiences and making sure that we have access to the right technologies that can get the insights and the data for us. A lot of these things are low cost for internal teams. Microsoft Clarity is one of the ones that's a free tool out there. So it's just finding the right tools to help your team really evolve your experiences over time. And after this, taking a step back and looking at all of the things that we do to implement and drive success in digital experiences, what are some things that we can give to you as a team or that we can share out? We have these 8 kind of clear takeaways that help us to continue to build this culture of continuous improvement and data literacy. One is education and training, right? We want to make sure we're investing in our internal team to understand the pieces of technology that they're working with and the website at large. 2 is implementing those clear data strategies. Right now we know that there's clients out there that have just GA4 out of the box. We want to make sure we're at least leveraging the tools that we already have to get the best data out of them. And then 3, make sure we know what tools we have at our disposal, and then gathering maybe even more that can help us pinpoint specific insights. And then 4, encouraging those data-driven practices internally. Using data to back up our decision making, bringing that data to meetings to understand, should we have this CTA here? Should we be driving to this campaign? How are we driving to this campaign? Always backing everything up with that data that we've taken so much time to build. And then from there, also gather stakeholder feedback. You have students on your campuses, you have alumni and faculty at your fingertips. We want to hear from them. We want to understand their pain points and the things that they're experiencing on the web, and we want to help make those things better. And then 6, continue to promote collaboration across university units, but maintaining a central website ownership. This is something that we know is easier said than done. There's a lot of politics involved there. But at the end of the day, we're all stakeholders in the success of the university, and someone needs to own the website and be in charge of it, especially from a marketing perspective. This is a #1 marketing tool. It is our touch point with prospective students, but we do have experts across the university and the institution at large. So bringing them into those conversations and gathering their insights is super helpful. And then making sure we're celebrating any small successes, any small wins. We drove clicks to this campaign and we got so many donors. Or what, we launched this new area of the website with this new interactive tool for housing and student life. It's super cool. Just celebrating all of those wins and making sure that that's all known internally will really also just drive excitement for the web experience. And then last, just making sure we continue to learn and adapt. Attending webinars like this, attending conferences, continuing to be up to date on the tools and how they update themselves and change over time will really improve your data streams and your data sets. So with that, that's all the information we have to give you today. We did pull a lot of data from our CMO study. Provided in this deck here is a link to it and the QR code. You can download some of those reports and watch the webinars. This is something we do every couple of years and gather data from across the industry, like I said at the outset. And then with that, I think I'm going to hand it over to Lex for another teaser.
Yes, that is right, Dan. Thank you all so much. Before we go into the Q&A portion of this webinar, a bit of a shameless plug from us and me in particular here. I want to share something that we are incredibly excited about, our upcoming State of Higher Ed website and marketing survey. So at Simpson Scarborough, we're always looking to advance the industry's collective understanding. And this new iteration of our 2021 survey will do just that. So this comprehensive survey conducted in partnership with Pantheon will capture critical benchmarks on website and marketing technology, organizational structures, measurement, performance, and strategic priorities like brand building and streamlining information architecture. So What's changed in the EDU landscape over the last 3 years? Where is the maturity of institutional website and marketing strategies headed? These are the questions that we'll be answering with all of your help. So we invite higher ed CIOs, CTOs, directors of digital, and any other sort of senior leaders overseeing their website and marketing technology at all US four-year nonprofit institutions to participate. If you're interested in learning more, participating in this survey, and staying informed about the report's release, scan the QR code below and sign up. And now for the Q&A portion, Carrie, I do see that there are at least 2 questions in the chat that we can start with, and then I'm sure others might have questions to chime in as well.
Yeah, that's correct. Okay, so Barbara asks, could you speak more to presenting cost and aid information on a website, specifically how to present such detailed information across multiple audiences, including current student, future student, undergrad, grad, international, etc. Lex, would you like to start?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. And then Dan, I'm sure you'll probably have a little bit more that you'll want to add to this too. But overall, we should really be thinking about if we are on the main institutional website, that all of the primary landing pages are tailored to prospective students. So cost and aid should really be answering prospective students' questions first when it comes to that type of content. And then underneath, that's where a design system really comes into play, where you can start to create detailed children pages off of cost and aid that are tailored to current students or specific audiences like grad, international, that you had also mentioned, Barbara. That would be kind of my overarching strategy when it comes to cost and aid. But Dan, is there anything you would add to that?
No, other than just making sure that it's accessible at the highest level. And I think you kind of touched on that with the primary landing pages. Um, from there, that's when you can drill in and get detailed, but making sure that those pathways are accessible from the jump is what's more critically important.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan and Lex. Sandy asked, based on your experience and data, is there a general best practice for RFI placement on the homepage and admissions pages?
Yeah, to answer this specifically, I think it's most important to probably understand what type of website it is. Sometimes we work with clients just specifically in a school and college within a university. Sometimes we work on more conversion-based websites that we're driving paid media to. So if this question is in context to the main university website, which I'm just going to kind of assume it is in that sense, I would say that we don't want to be overly salesy with this sort of process. Making sure that things like the homepage and the admission page are really telling the overarching story about the institution and what value adds that they can provide by getting a degree from this institution compared to others is kind of the storytelling that we're after within the pages themselves. And making sure then that the main navigation remains sticky and omnipresent throughout the experience, showcasing these major KPIs like requesting more information is kind of the goal. So we're allowing the prospective student and their families to take the next step when they're ready to, and keeping the page content really focused on storytelling.
Great. Dan, anything to add for that?
No, the only thing I would add in regards to request info specifically is that's also really context sensitive. It's not like a visit where you kind of already know you want to see the university and visit more. Request info is after you've kind of explored and discovered and understood the context of information on a page. That's really the only thing I would add to that and back it up.
Awesome. Thank you. Stephen asked, what is the best calendar year to measure data year over year? June, July, or January, December, start of accepting applications September to August. Cassie?
That's a great question. It's not, my analyst brain says it depends. But my consultant brain tells you that I would align it with whatever your fiscal year is, because that's where you're trying to measure enrollment and different institutional goals. So being able to then align the rest of your activities to that fiscal opportunity is going to be most relevant and most contextually relevant for the additional stakeholders that we're trying to get interest in this information, which is the C-suite and those other folks. So I would asterisk it with aligning it to your fiscal year.
Awesome. And another question that we have about GA4, could you share additional resources on creating custom reports in GA4? We found it difficult to customize, save, and share reports. It's a little broad, but hopefully you can provide a little bit more context here, Cassie.
Adam, do you actually want to talk to that real quick?
Yeah, sure, I can speak to that. Um, so it's a great question. I think the good news is that GA4 has rolled out a number of improvements to reports really in the last 6 months or so. So it is tough. I would say there's a few clunky things that they haven't fixed yet, but our biggest recommendations would be to familiarize yourself with what dimensions and metrics are available in GA4. For example, familiarize yourself with the difference between something like a landing page and a page path, because they are very different. So a landing page would be something like the first page viewed in a session, where a page path would be the page on which an event occurred. So they're actually very different um, in terms of the level of depth that they go into. I would also say just experiment with it. It's one of those things where you really need hands-on experience. You got to spend a few hours to really learn what you can and can't do. And then in some cases, you will need to create explorations. For something like a path exploration, if you want to see what are the sequence of actions or the sequence of pages that users are viewing, that's what more advanced analysis. So that's something that couldn't be accomplished with a report, but it could be with an exploration. So yeah, biggest recommendations would be read Google's documentation and just play around in there and remove all the unnecessary and irrelevant reports, especially. Make it as easy as possible for your team to find the data that actually benefits the institution.
Awesome.
The only thing that I would add to that real quick is the difference between a report and exploration is key in this as well. So a report is meant to give you quick summarized data. So I would think about limiting to that to like 2 dimensions and maybe 3 metrics. But if you're looking for something a little bit more complex, that will have to go into an exploration where you can start to be a little bit more specific about the different parts of what you're pulling into the report. So just take that into consideration as well as there's a reason why those reports are limited. Not to get super technical, but it works on a different set of data. I think that's something to qualify is that it doesn't work on the entirety of all of the dimensions and metrics that Google has. It summarizes it so it can feed it to you faster. So that's why a little bit behind the curtain of why there's the limitations that exist there.
Thank you, Cassie and Adam. Just a follow up since we're already talking about analytics. How often should someone track traffic of a website? Is there any suggestions you can give to that?
Our recommendation is monthly for traffic. So not necessarily looking at it on a daily basis. That's not going to tell us a bunch. If you have something going on like March Madness or you have other high impact events on campus, that might be something where you look at it a little bit more on a lower, more granular level. But traditionally, I would recommend looking at traffic monthly. And that's when you're really going to be able to start to see that seasonality that I was alluding to earlier, because you're going to see those ebbs and flows in the data. And then as you continue to build your sets of data, you'll see that usually replicates. You see those same trends year after year. So yeah, monthly.
Awesome. Thanks, Cassie. Jackie asks, can you touch upon any significant focuses between desktop and mobile design for a homepage? I believe that would be Lex or Dan.
Sure. Yeah, Dan, we can kind of tackle this together. There's a couple of different angles that I'm thinking about when it comes to this question. The highest level that I sort of want to start with is an insight from the Nielsen Norman Group study that both Dan and Cassie referenced in this presentation, which is when prospective students are in discovery or search process for an institution that they're interested in or looking to attend, they're mostly doing that on desktop. So while designing mobile first is incredibly important, and we need to make sure that that is happening, and we're designing fully responsive websites, it's important to balance sort of the what is sort of really immersive and impressive when it comes to desktop design and what is really effective when it comes to mobile design. So thinking about the prospective student, they're often the main audience who's coming first to that homepage, and it's important to tailor the content on the homepage to that audience. And it's important to tailor it in a desktop sort of presentation that still effectively breaks down in mobile when they inevitably and hopefully return to the site. So I would say that's kind of the biggest focus from a design perspective, is striking the balance between desktop and mobile design for that homepage. Regarding content design on the homepage, then I think it's really important, again, to kind of focus that to the prospective student audience. So we've been working really hard when we're working with institutions to rethink the homepage as not necessarily a sort of playground for all of the different voices and content to be promoted on the homepage, taking away or limiting things like news and events, but really telling the overall institution story about why you would want to attend here, what that student experience would be like. I think that that kind of answers it from a few different angles there. So I know we have a few more questions in the chat, and we're getting kind of low on time, Carrie.
Yep, we'll just kind of pair these last two questions together before we let everyone go. Grace says, we don't have an analytics expert on our team. What is your recommendation for learning, understanding GA4, Google Courses, HubSpot certs, etc.? And we also have a question about suggested tools for web and digital marketing. So we can kind of pair it together to see if you all have any other suggestions for tools for GA4 and beyond for our attendees.
Yeah, great question. And that's not abnormal to not have an analytics expert on the team. That's actually the case that we see most often. I have a list of tools that we typically send to some of our clients when we're exploring web analytics and measurement frameworks, but definitely check out Google's information first. They have a lot of free courses from beginner to intermediate on the different things within Google Analytics that you should know now with GA4. They also have some really good, like, helpful, what are they called? Like help documents that you can go and like find some answers on specific to what you're trying to achieve, whether that's customizing an audience or when you're trying to create custom events, things like that. The other thing I would recommend is, depending on how in depth you want to get, one of the trainings that we do is through Analytics Mania. Julius is a wizard when it comes to Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager. So that's definitely one that I like to plug. It's very detailed and gets into the weeds, so it's not for everyone, but for those who want to learn more about that, that is definitely a resource. He has some videos also on YouTube. So like that's my other place is if we're thinking about free resources, YouTube is a place to go. You can search, I know that's like a simple answer, but searching on YouTube for how to do something in GA4 typically is something that I would mostly recommend as your first stop because it's free and it's accessible.
Yeah, the only other thing I would add is Microsoft Clarity. It's a user behavior and heat mapping and click tracking tool. And right now it's free. It's been free for a while. I don't know if the plan for that is to change eventually. But there's no reason you shouldn't be implementing that because then you can really see how effective the content is on your web page and your page design.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Lex, ready to wrap it up?
Yeah, let's do it, Carrie. Okay, so I really appreciate you all joining us today. Everyone, on behalf of Simpson Scarborough, appreciates you all joining today. And thank you so much to our speakers, Cassie and Dan, for sharing their expertise. If anyone has any more questions or you want to continue the conversation, don't hesitate to reach out. But until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and let's keep advancing higher ed together.